The much anticipated, much discussed Celeste has finally arrived on Nintendo Switch. Is Matt Makes Games' latest foray one for the record books, or does it fall and tumble straight down the mountainside? What's going on, everybody? It's Zach from Switch Force. Gabe is here, and we are proud to present our Celeste review. We've been playing the game for a number of days now. Both of us have completed the game, and so we are in a pretty prime spot to give you a complete review of this $20 2D difficult platformer joint from the team that brought you Towerfall.
I'm usually not into games in this style of gameplay, but this one absolutely grabbed me from the get-go. Obviously, we can compare it to Super Meat Boy and The End Is Nigh. I feel like this one does so much different, and it improves the genre in huge ways. And overall, I love the experience. But Zach, what do you think?
Fantastic game. Right off the bat, if you want my quick review, it's that this has risen to the heap, the top of the heap, the top of the mountain, and is now my Switch indie king, or queen, if you want to honor Madeline here. I think it's a fantastic game, and Gabe, like you mentioned, what this does that elevates it for me is expand upon a genre that is very popular but very rote at this point, right? The very challenging 2D platformer with pixel art has been done time and time and time again, and yet Celeste, through some small tweaks to formula and through an injection of storytelling, has found a way to really expand and change things up when at first blush it doesn't seem as such. So we'll dive in a whole lot deeper now. It's $20, like I mentioned, fully worth it. My playtime clocked in just over 6 hours, but there's plenty more content to dive into. This game has 7 chapters plus an 8th chapter that requires some unlocks, as well as B-sides, which are insanely difficult versions of the pre-existing chapters, and it has an 8-bit minigame version of the mountain climbing action. So replayability and longevity are perfect here. There's no complaints there. I want to start off, though, Gabe, with the gameplay and the controls, because that is something that is critical for a title like this, and Matt Makes Games nailed it. It is precise as precise can be, and even though you will die upwards of 1,000 times, or maybe even 2,000 times across your playthrough, not once did I feel like it was the game's fault.
No, it's the perfection of controls, really. And it's very basic, right? You're walking or running, and you're jumping and you're dashing, and that's it. You really don't have anything else to worry about. You're not really powering up very much as the game goes. There's not a lot of new gameplay elements that get introduced. So they were able to just fine-tune those and make sure that those work perfectly, and then just kind of mold the levels around them, it feels like. So I have zero complaints about that. And like you mentioned, every time I died, I knew that it was just me messing up a wrong button input or something like that. I would have loved to have one of those software up on my screen that shows you what button prompts I'm pressing while you mess up. I kept thinking about that. I was like, oh, I know I messed up, but I would have loved to see how I messed up. So yeah, the controls are phenomenal.
Yeah, and it is interesting that they give you such a limited moveset. And I would say in Chapter 1, I worried, ooh, is this going to be far more simplistic than I thought? They had touted there were over 600 screens. I was like, okay, there's these screens of puzzling platforming, and that's about it. But no, the game really expands, and not in the way of giving Madeline, the main character, extra abilities, although she will change a little bit throughout the adventure. It's more in how they manipulate the world around her. It's more in how they change up the environments and what kind of obstacles they introduce. I felt like they did a phenomenal job of not just giving you oh, here's a spiky platform, but giving you new things to platform upon and interact with that change up the gameplay inherently. Masterful, right? It's not just, a more difficult challenge, a more faster moving obstacle. It was things that, and continues to be things all the way up to the end of the game, that allow you to fly around the screen, that allow you to bounce, that allow you to regen your dash. Because I guess we should explain that, like you said, the dash is the way that you're navigating this world, and sort of the mastery of that dash is that's your mastery of Celeste. And it's one of those games that you very much grow and get better as you go. I went back and played some of the earlier chapters. Levels that took me 25, 30 minutes to complete, I was flying through in 7, because you will build upon your own skill set so vastly and so rapidly that you can return to those earlier areas and see, wow, not only is it changing up the background and changing up the music, it really is building step by step, block by block upon this gameplay skill set, and now I am a master of being Madeline.
For sure. And while the gameplay for Madeline herself never really changes, the levels introduce all of these elements that you mentioned. You have bubbles, you do have the ability to fly around as well. But one of the very cool things is that each of the chapters are so wholly different than the one that came before it. Like, you think like, okay, this one's really cool. The next one completely visually, audibly, and stylistically different than the one before. You have completely different challenges. It's not just like, hey, get from this point of the screen to the other one. You have to find keys to unlock doors, and there are more puzzle elements that get introduced. So the way that they continue to build upon what they laid in the previous chapter, it's really, really good. There's not a whole lot of chapters. There's 7 total, but with the fact that you're going to be dying a whole lot probably, that does pad up the gameplay time. I want to mention my gameplay time was around 8 hours. Yours was around 6. I died a whole lot. Me and you have had conversation about how differently we played the game. There's also collectible strawberries to get in each one of these chapters. There's like a certain number of them, and the replayability does come in when you probably want to go back and explore a little bit more, find secret areas, and find more of these strawberries that you previously didn't get. One thing I do wish was that there was incentive to get them all, because at some point I was just like, okay, these strawberries mean nothing. Why am I dying over and over and over trying to get that one strawberry? So I just left it, basically.
Yeah, and we do not know. We haven't seen other reviews yet. So perhaps there is a reward for unlocking all of the berries, for collecting all the berries.
Good point.
We do know that there are things that are locked behind other collectibles and behind other challenges, so who knows how deep this game runs. I will say that the mechanics to me are so good. I craved the berries. I really wanted to get them just to prove to myself that I could complete a room, that I could complete a challenge laid before me. They're so precise and so demanding, and as we mentioned, it's either you're good enough or you're not. And I wanted to be good enough to get all the berries. So even though there was no specific upfront reward, I found it amazing that I was constantly seeking these berries. And that's a testament to the game. And you're right, Gabe. The chapters do build upon one another. I feel like they get better and better. They introduce more and different mechanics. And by the end, it culminates in this beautiful symphonic smoothie of each of the chapters, which is really fun, also really challenging. I want to highlight the boss battles, because that is something that always has meant a lot to me. I'm a big boss battle guy. It's one of my favorite parts about Legend of Zelda. I thought the boss battles in Odyssey were a step up from Mario. 2D games are a little trickier to do boss battles. If you're going to go the platforming route, right? If you're going to go combat like a Shovel Knight or Mega Man, you can have stellar boss battles. But something like Ori and the Blind Forest introduced these movement-based boss battles. And man, Celeste, to me, delivers the best iteration of that kind of boss battle I've ever seen. And there is a boss battle at the end of Chapter 6 that I would say is 100% God tier. It is like a 20-plus minute fight, battle, movement, I don't even know what you call it. So good. It's going to go down as one of my favorite moments of 2018. I can already guarantee that. Yeah,
they absolutely stand out. I love that they completely stayed away from the, hey, jump on this enemy type thing. Because they can easily do that, right? It would have been incredibly easy to just go ahead and go with the tried and true thing, but they shied away from that. They did things their own way, and not that we've never seen things like this. You mentioned Ori and the Blind Forest. I know Rayman does things like that, and Shu, to an extent, is that the entire game is kind of just running away from something. But Celeste does it in such a cool way, because you have to be so amazingly precise. It ends up kind of being like playing regularly but on steroids, just because you're constantly having to move and you have to be incredibly precise when moving from platform to platform. So yeah, they're great.
For sure. And this is a good time to bring in our little segment called If You Like This Switch Game, You'll Like Celeste. And the obvious comparisons are Super Meat Boy and The End Is Nigh. But as you just stated, Gabe, Rayman is kind of a good precursor, I feel, to Celeste. It's different in its approach, but Celeste is a far more challenging game, and I think if you liked Rayman and are looking to continue to build those skills and play in a world that has brilliant art, music, and inventive platforming, this would be a great next step.
Yeah, for sure. There's definitely little things that carry over from Rayman to this pretty well. Zach, I feel like the next thing that we should cover here is the story. Right? Such a huge part of the game, the best part of the game. I feel like without the story, this is just another one of those very hard, platforming games, right? That's completely what separates this. There's very cool characters. Theo and the other part of yourself stand out. We have Mr. Oshiro, who is this weird ghost that has all these types of issues, but like the game is legitimately touching, and to see a 2D like difficult platforming like this like evoke emotion in me, it was really strange because so much of it is super relatable, at least for people like myself, and I know you, so I can you as well. So that was like such a surprise.
Oh yeah, it was a very big surprise, and I would argue that the game does separate itself gameplay-wise for reasons that we mentioned, like the ever-evolving chapters, the perfect controls, and those boss battles. But yes, it was very shocking to me. I guess I didn't know that this game dealt with Madeline and some of her mental struggles. It does bring in topics of anxiety and depression, and battling within yourself to find who you really are, and that struck me as super unusual, but they handle it with such grace, and I felt like the dialogue was so well done. Remember, this is a very small team. The studio is called Matt Makes Games. That should tell you all you need to know, and yet they did this better than most AAA studios. I feel like they addressed and conveyed the topics and the themes eloquently and with maturity, and they even integrated it gameplay-wise. I think something that is so brilliant about Celeste is it finds a way to tie the plot to the gameplay, which is very rare. So you have a little breathing minigame. You have moments where you're literally facing off against yourself, and we don't want to go into too much spoiler territory, but it's a masterful execution. And really, like you said, Gabe, it's touching. And if you are someone or know people that have dealt with some of these things like anxiety or depression or a little bit of existential quandary, it's really going to hit home. And the progression also as well. It's not just like one of those games that, oh my God, everything's happy and your person is perfect now. Like it really, I don't know, some of those final sequences and some of that, there's like a huge dialogue tree section randomly towards the back third of the game. Like, it really hit home and in a really smart way. So yeah, mad props on how they integrated the story. It's shockingly emotional, and that does just add so much more oomph. And that's what, to me, takes this to like a Game of the Year contender status.
And I want to make sure to insert this because it's not a sad game. It's not a depressing game. I think it's actually really uplifting, right? And it tackles, the themes of having like self-doubt and, sort of like believing in yourself. And I feel like, us talking about it having to deal with anxiety and depression, like people might get the wrong impression. It's 100% an uplifting game. So I wanted
quite
to
literally as you climb the mountain.
Yeah, I wanted to make that clear.
Yeah. Speaking of the mountain climb, one thing that struck me over and over again was how this game has no minimap. And it is structured in a very open format in that there are rooms and screens that are optional, just for berry collection. There's also many different paths to reach your desired end goal, and yet you never quite feel lost. It somehow guides you without any set guide. It somehow linearly moves you towards the end without any specific compass, and I found that to be just genius because they clearly had to lay out these rooms, these screens in such a way that was going to funnel the player without them feeling forced and allow for open exploration, but always helping them return to objective. To me, that was one of the, like, design-wise and game just theory-wise, that was something that really impressed me in how they were able to achieve such an open game and yet such a focused track as well.
Agreed. The next thing that we should probably touch on here, music, Zach. A beautiful, beautiful soundtrack. They say that there is over 2 hours of original music led by dazzling live piano and catchy synth beats. It is super catchy. There was times where I just like kind of sat there and listened to music a little bit. It's really, really good. Hopefully there's a soundtrack at some point because I know that's something that games do a lot these days. They'll like release a soundtrack independently. I feel like this one can absolutely stand on its own.
Oh, yeah, it's really great. It ties in with the feel and the vibe. It evolves as the chapters progress, and within each chapter, I like the small touch of when Madeline is underwater, it dulls and muffles the music. That was super amazing. It's really great, and the woman that worked on the soundtrack here, like, superb job. That was absolutely insane. Now, I also want to say another little segment here is that if Celeste doesn't seem for you, if you're not into challenging 2D platformers, if you don't like pixelated art, but you're looking for a great Switch game, I would say wait for Night in the Woods. That is a critically acclaimed 2D point-and-click adventure with a lot of storytelling. So if something like the themes and the tone of Celeste is appealing, but you don't want to deal with the platforming, maybe wait for that one. It's hitting on February 1st. Keep your eyes peeled for that. There still is a lot of good stuff coming to Switch. I also wanted to address, Gabe, whether you think that Celeste is better handheld or docked. I mean, there's a lot of Switch games that take advantage of the portability far better than others. How did you play Celeste?
This is the first game I have ever played on Switch, like exclusive. I wasn't say primarily, but not even primarily. Exclusively handheld. I never played this thing docked, not once. It started off because I made the handheld video, which you can go check on the channel now, where there's some off-screen footage so you can see what the game is like when the Switch isn't docked. And from there, I just felt comfortable with the controls. And, you know, as I've mentioned a couple of times, I'm moving. So just having not everything be set up, it just lent itself perfectly to me playing this thing handheld. Did a lot of it just on the sofa and in bed, things like that. I had a really good time. I had zero issue with it whatsoever. The game's still beautiful. I mean, and for a 2D side-scrolling game like this, frame rate isn't really going to be a thing that affects you because it's going to maintain whatever frame rate it's at. So I had a great time with it. I did not miss playing this docked at all. I can see how the Pro Controller would be appealing, but I mean, I got around just fine. I had no complaints.
Yeah, I played it about half and half. I think it's a game that, given its graphical nature, works just as well either way. It's cool to see it blown up on the TV. It's also brilliant to be played handheld. I did feel that my proficiency was enhanced by the Pro Controller, and spreading my hands out for the Joy-Con led to a little bit of a skill drop-off for me, a little bit. But it was noticeable. I did prefer the Pro Controller, but you can't go wrong. This is one of those Switch games that is equally awesome, handheld or docked. I do want to address difficulty. Gabe, did you feel like this game was too difficult? Because there is that fine line of being very challenging and very like, ooh, enticing to get to the next part and satisfying. Was this a case of that, or was it grating and, you know, throw your controller inducing and something that began to wear and bother on you?
I mean, it's a good question. It's a valid question. To me, this never got to that point. I never got angry while playing Celeste, not once. And I am known to get angry. So it's not like I'm completely passive and I just don't get angry at video games. I do. Just Celeste didn't do that for me. I don't know if it was the music or the fact that literally every time I died, it was probably my own fault. And honestly, yeah, it's like difficult, but it's not overly difficult. I feel like I do think average gamers, I see myself as being pretty average, can get through this. It might take you a little longer. You might die a few more times, but the fact that it loads instantly when you die, like, there's no repercussion for dying. You can just die over and over. One of the loading screens even says, hey, be proud of your deaths. They're teaching you. And that's kind of the way I took it, right? Yeah, right. I had close to 2,000 deaths at the end, which is, you know, more than you, excuse me. But it doesn't matter because I had a really good time. And yeah, at some point, those deaths kind of become a badge of honor. Like, hey, I'm this terrible at this, and I still completed it. Not
to rag on you at all, but that's a great point in that we both love this game, and Gabe had double the deaths that I did. So it didn't frustrate him. It didn't deter from the experience. It is that solid and superb, actually, of an experience that dying 2,000 times was not upsetting, and that speaks volumes to the game there. I think it is very challenging. I think if you want to go for all the berries, it is going to push you. The B-sides are brutal. I haven't even really dived into them beyond a couple of the first jumps because they are just insane. I did beat that 8-bit minigame. That was a trip, but very gratifying. I feel like it's a game that makes you want to fist pump when you do hit the jump. There are a lot of sequences as the game progresses that are multi-screened versus single-screen. Now, these can go one of two ways. They can be very, very exhilarating because they rely more on flow and completing things in one fell swoop. I could see, though, if you are not someone who is accustomed to this style of gameplay and you're not as interested in skill-based jumps, gets a little grating because you are having longer sequences. For the most part, Celeste is about a single screen challenge, and if you die, you're just right there, right back, instant load. Very convenient, very player friendly. Towards the back half of the game, we get these multi 2, 3, 4, 5 screen long jumping sequences that if you die, you will return. I hope that doesn't deter people, but I do want to make it known that it could be a bit of a factor.
Yeah, but I figure but when you reach that point, you've already played so much of the game. Like, you've
Potentially,
done you've done a lot of learning already. So I don't know. I feel like it guides you to that, and they stick them at the end for a reason.
Right.
I think by that point you're just used to the gameplay and you're gonna be okay. But I'm who knows.
Yeah, as long as you're okay with deaths, it's trial by fire, and that can be fun in its own way. In closing, Celeste is absolutely brilliant. For myself, it is now my favorite Switch indie. It has usurped things like Enter the Gungeon and SteamWorld Dig 2, and really a remarkable title. I wish it was a Switch exclusive, just because I think it would add just a must-buy, must-play experience to the eShop. But even as a multi-platform release, it still is queen of the castle, and one that I will go back to. I think that is a big deal for me. If you know me, I don't really replay games. I'm not one to continue once I beat, but this is something that I want to explore more. I want to get more berries. I want to check out the B-sides. I want to see what that strange waterfall in Chapter 8 that I cannot unlock yet is all about, and I like the characters. As silly as that is for a pixelated 2D difficult platformer, I really like the characters. I found them endearing. Like, if I could get a freaking Madeline plush, I would put that thing on my shelf.
Yeah, I like Madeline a whole lot. She's basically me.
It's an amazing game, an amazing experience, one I think we can safely recommend to every Switch owner. It definitely is up there alongside some of the other greats as one of the first Switch games you can invest in, and at $20, it is an absolute gem. We are starting off a new scoring system where we rank Switch games out of 0 to 5 Joy-Con, and as I'm sure you have guessed by the entirety of this review, Celeste earns 5 Joy-Con. Kudos and congrats to Matt Makes Games and all those involved. You have built an absolutely brilliant experience, and one that I think is going to go down in the record books as one of the best indies of the year and one of the best overall games of the year. So let us know your take on Celeste in the comments down below. If you've been playing it, we'd love to hear what you think. If you're planning on picking it up, definitely tell us that as well. And if this review somehow made you say, no, I don't want any Madeline in my life, well, we're curious about that as well. Let us know what you think of the review. We're trying to always improve and build upon this process. We will be back with another review shortly. In the meantime, make sure to subscribe and stay up to date on all the latest and greatest from the Switch and its stellar games like Celeste. Follow us on Twitter, twitter.com/theswitchforce. We're trying to get rid of that and make it Switchforce, but for now, link in the description down below. We love you, we appreciate you, and Celeste is brilliant. Thanks so much for myself and Gabe. Switchforce out.